Welcome back to my Commodore 64 Memories videos. This is where I look at old Commodore 64 software and some of the technical details behind them. Today we have Prix Circuit, published in 1989 by Accolade. The developer was Distinctive Software, coded by Frank Barchard and Kevin P. Pickle. Graphics by John Bulkler, and musician was Chris Accolade. I hope I've got your names correct there. I'm having a look at the original disc version today. I like this little loading bar indicator up on the right hand corner, and of course there's a sprite in the middle of the screen with the red bounding box, which is common. Oh look, that was a whole sprite sheet there. For some kind of dissolve? Yeah, look at that. A whole great big sprite sheet of expanded or horizontally expanded sprites for a sprite-based dissolve between what look like bitmap screens, right? Let's just double check that. Yeah, so cool. Look, oh, there's a nice little animation as well. So, Distinctive Software Inc. Okay. Right, so straight away we can see that the volume register is changing quite rapidly. And that indicates that we've got the volume register being used to play samples, which was a very common way of playing samples. Let's have a look. So I've got rid of basically the most of the sprite-based dissolve by going into this debug view here, which only shows the sprites on the targeting cursor position, raster targeting cursor position. So we can see actually there's a left to right draw for the bitmap data, kind of behind the sprite-based dissolve, which was a bit unusual. Maybe they did a nice left to right wipe for the bitmap transition screens, and then they decided to add a sprite-based dissolve over the top of it. So I'm not actually controlling this with the joystick. It's actually going through what looks like a semi-self-controlled demo mode, right, showing all of the track select and everything like that, which is really quite cool. But I really do like the music. The music is really quite excellent for the time period when this game was actually released. We have some nice graphics for the different racing teams that were common existing at this particular point in time in history when the game was released. Wow, look at that. Yeah, a 6-speed gearbox with, oh my gosh, a 3.5 litre V10. Well, okay, quite a nice engine. I prefer the V12s, to be honest, but okay. So I really do like that full screen sprite-based dissolve. Let's go and see if we can qualify. So it came up, failed to qualify, so I had to start the qualification period again. So we've got quite a lot of stuff on the screen, right? These red bounding boxes, they indicate where sprites are being drawn on the screen. So we can see that the knob for the gear stick, or gear shift rather, the speedometer, or the rev, what is it? The rev counter actually. Plus also a steering wheel indicator, plus also probably some borders around the wing mirrors, and also the map. Maybe the map is, well, no, I think there's something over the map, right? Maybe a border around the map. Those all look like they're sprites. Moving the targeting cursor up and down, we can see where the sprites are approximately updated on the screen. We could also see, look, oh look, the bitmap mode is changing between high res at the top. So the high res is being used for the time display and the map. And then we have, oh, it's clouds in the background. Okay, so there are clouds in the background behind the map as sprites. Interesting. Okay, so anyway, we've got the high resolution bitmap mode at the top. And then if I move the targeting cursor down, it goes into multicolour bitmap mode for the track here. And then we've got track rendering going into the multicolour bitmap mode. And then down at the bottom, we seem to have a single, yes, we have a double buffered bitmap mode up at the top of the screen. And then when it gets down to the lower part of the steering wheel and the actual driver's dashboard console thing, then it goes into a single buffered bitmap, so there's no double buffered bitmap for that part of the screen. I'm looking at the memory for the bitmap data, you see, when I'm allowing the frames to actually progress, or when the game progresses as well. But yeah, we can see here, I've paused it, of course. There's actually a scroll offset as well, so there seems to be at least a vertical scroll offset for the upper portion of the bitmap screen. Interesting, okay. And yeah, we've got some sprites down at the bottom, yeah, for what we expected to see, right? So look at that. So the top portion of the game screen in the bitmap mode is actually using the fine pixel scroll to bounce the screen subtly up and down. That generates quite a good visual effect. It means that also that you don't need to render the entire game view when you want to shift the screen up and down. So I have a feeling that this game has the roughly, quite relatively slow frame rate for drawing the track. But then, look, if I move the steering wheel left and right, and also the rev counter and everything, those sprites update a lot smoother than the apparent frame rate of the track update for the main game portion of the screen. So yes, I think this game is using kind of like a split update model, if you like. So some portions of the screen are updating at a faster frame rate compared to the track rendering of the main portion of the display, which is, to be honest, a little bit relatively slow. It's not, it's not 25 frames a second, it's not 50 frames a second. It looks more like 12, 10, maybe even less than 10, maybe 8 frames a second for the track rendering. But that's, kind of expected. There's quite a lot of complexity going into this track draw. By the looks of it, it's drawing exclusively into multicolour bitmap mode. So, I think we'll give them a pass on that. It's actually rendering relatively quite a lot. We'll delve into a little bit more into the track rendering, I think, in ICU64 with Vice, and we'll use the more mature features inside the machine code monitor. I'm just trying to qualify, not very well trying to qualify, because I want to see what happens when we get into the race. Right? I'm interested to see what happens there. So here we are, coming up at the end of the qualifying lap, and I qualified 10th. Well, not great, but it's good, because now we can see where all of the sprites are. And look, all of the cars are rendered with sprites. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sprites being used for the middle portion of the screen, just for rendering those cars. Maybe 6, but yeah, well, okay, so I'm pretty sure that there's going to be dynamic sprite frames, because we've got the whole bitmap mode, right? And the whole bitmap screen uses up just over half of the whole entire Vic bank. So I'm pretty sure that we're going to have dynamic sprites being calculated into some fixed sprite slots. But yeah, for the sprite frames. But yeah, look at that. Wow, okay, so all of the cars are nicely rendered sprites. Because the actual game display is quite narrow, I think that leads to some challenges. Oh look, and the signposts at the side of the track as well, they look like sprites because they had some red boundary boxes around them. So yeah, we've got sprites with the cars, the trackside signposts, and then rendered on top of a multicolour bitmap mode update. Fantastic though. I mean, for the time when this game was actually released, and the complexity of the track rendering, it's actually quite smooth, right? And the frame rate is not smooth, but the track edges and the definition of the track graphics itself is actually quite smooth. So anyway, let's look at this now in ICU 64, I think. So we've got the double buffered bitmap mode in the graphics debug map there. We've got a bitmap in the bank at 8000, and we've got a bitmap in the bank at C1000. in hex. And I'm just saving a snapshot because I want to get back to this later on. So let's have a look. Let's see what's storing into one of the bitmaps, right? Into an area of the screen where we know that there's going to be track pixels being drawn. I'm just using the machine code monitor fill command to test fill an area of memory, which I'm hoping is in, there we go, that's smack bang in the middle of the track bitmap view. So we're going to put a watch range store point on those memory address ranges, and we'll go into this routine here. Let's hop out. Let's scroll up, because obviously we had a semi-unrolled loop there. That's probably an optimized draw of some description, but let's look. There's a jump. This looks like the beginning of the actual routine, right? It looks like something jumped into it or JSR'd into it at 358C. Yep, there we go. So let's fill while we are in what looks like a draw routine, because it was doing a quite a large unrolled fill loop, right? By the looks of it, let's fill both bitmaps. I think so. I've filled the first bitmap, which is at 8,000 in hex in that Vic bank, and let's do the same for the bitmap which is in Vic bank C1000. Okay, let's fill that whole memory range, but not the bottom part of the bitmap, because that contains other graphical data by the looks of it. Don't forget that the bottom half of the screen was only using a single buffer bitmap rather than double buffer. There we go. Look. Okay, so it's rendering what looks like scan lines into that bitmap there, which is in that Vic bank. So every time I press X and return, it is continuing the execution and then pausing again at the beginning of this routine. And you can see every iteration or every call into this routine at 358C is rendering one span of pixels. So it's probably position, maybe position, but it's definitely got a color, I think, being passed in, and a length. It doesn't really make much sense if it has a position, because if you always start on the left and then draw a length of color and then another length of color straight after that, and so on and so forth, then you basically draw your track, right? So yeah, we can see how the track render is done in this game now. We can see it's rendering actually, or using a semi-unrolled speed loop, if you like, for rendering horizontal scan lines with different lengths and colors. And it just basically does that for the whole frame, and then it hops over into the other bitmap. So now I've cleared both bitmaps, right? You can see, look, the only things which are being updated practically are the steering wheel graphics for the different frame for the steering wheel. It looks like it's swapping it out as well, look, because the blank data comes from when I cleared the bitmap, right? And the flashing top portion of the dashboard was caused by only clearing partially the second bitmap, right? So I've restored the snapshot. So restoring the snapshot has stopped the engine sound from working, I think. That's okay, I don't mind. But yeah, I've restored the data now in both bitmap screens. So we can see now how well the game renders the track. I did not qualify. I need to qualify properly again, because there's one last thing that I think I want to check, and that's what the dynamic sprite updates look like in the graphics map sprites view windows there. So here we are at the start of the race again now, but in ICU 64 and Vice combination debugger. So there we go. There's both graphics maps. So one bank of sprites is in 8,000 and the other bank of sprites is in C1000, and you can see straight away, look, as I get close to the cars, and when it was at the start finish straight, there we go, you can see dynamic sprite updates going into those fixed sprite frames there. That's not really a surprise. because the bitmap takes up so much space that it's quite common to copy in the sprite frames for the ones that you actually want to display. And the clouds, oh yeah, the clouds are actually being updated with kind of like a mask behind the map as well. So as the clouds apparently go behind the map, there's a different number of vertical pixel columns being drawn for the clouds. You can see the frames for the signs come in as well. So yeah, cool. I really do like the way that this game uses a few different kind of like zones of multiplexed sprites. There's quite a lot going on really on this game, isn't there? There's a lot of dynamic sprites going on. There's a lot of bitmap drawing going on. Okay, the frame rate is not that great. Let's see if we can measure what the frame rate actually is by using the pause functionality in Vice. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to pause the game and then advance a frame until we can see the track render. Go ahead, so here we go. I'm just counting the number of frames that I advance by when I press the Alt and plus key combination. It advances 1 frame when it's in pause mode. And I think, let's just count that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. I think that's 8 or 9 frames. Yeah, so that was like 8 or 9 frames, roughly. So at 50 frames, well, 50 frames a second divided by, say, 9. Wow, that's only 5.5 frames per second for the bitmap render in the background. But you could see when I was advancing each frame, you could see that the screen was scrolling up and down independently of the actual track render frame rate, which is, you know, like a split game update, which allows you to have kind of like a higher frame rate for the actual gameplay input controls, but a lower apparent visual frame rate for the actual track draw itself. Quite a common methodology, really, for improving the stability and fidelity of the gameplay update loop, anyway. So here we are at the end of the last lap, and let's see where I am. End of the loading, and I think there's... Oh, wow! Oh gosh, I got position 1, I got first. I don't know how on earth I managed that in my Accolade car with number 3 written on the car. Gosh, wow, fantastic. I actually quite like this intermission screen. It's quite functional, but it's got great music, of course. And I have a feeling that there's a game win screen as well, isn't there? Let's have a look. Nice dissolve. Okay, yep. Shows the name, and what else do we have? Yeah, there we go. So we can also see that there's some dynamic sprite frame updates there in the graphics map for the, I hope it's champagne, coming out of the champagne bottles, and nothing else. So there we have it. Nice game using high-res and multicolour bitmap mode with dynamic sprites for the cars. And yeah, nice intermission screens. So yes, if you like these kind of technical deep dive videos, then please do consider liking or subscribing to this channel, or sending me a super thanks. They are always very much appreciated. Take care, have a great day, evening or night, wherever you are.